In the small town of Oakville, there was an old abandoned house that sat at the edge of the woods. The townsfolk whispered eerie stories about it, saying that it was haunted by a dark spirit. Nobody dared to venture near it after sunset, for they believed the stories were true. One day, a young girl named Mona moved to Oakville with her family. They bought a charming house just down the street from the abandoned one. Mona was excited about her new home, but she couldn't ignore the sense of dread that washed over her whenever she glanced at the old house. As days turned into weeks, Mona's curiosity got the better of her. One afternoon, she decided to explore the forbidden place with her friend Fiona. The two adventurous kids tiptoed through the overgrown weeds and creaky front gate. The moment they stepped inside, an eerie chill enveloped them. Inside the house, they found dusty furniture covered in white sheets and spiderwebs clinging to the corners. Mona's eyes caught a glimmer of something shiny on a shelf. She reached out and gasped when she saw what it was. A collection of old Barbie dolls, each with a sad expression on its face. Ignoring the unsettling feeling, Mona took one of the dolls and dusted it off. The doll had blonde hair, blue eyes, and wore a faded pink dress. Strangely, there was a name written on the back of the doll, Hannah. Mona thought it would make a great addition to her Barbie collection and decided to keep it. That night, as Mona lay in bed, she heard faint whispers coming from the shelf where she had placed the old Barbie. She dismissed it as her imagination and tried to sleep. However, the whispers grew louder, and Mona realized they were calling her name. "Mona, come and play with us," the dolls' voices echoed in the darkness. Terrified, Mona covered her ears and closed her eyes tightly. But the whispers persisted, becoming more urgent. Eventually, curiosity overpowered her fear, and she opened her eyes just a crack. To her horror, she saw the dolls standing on the shelf, their lifeless eyes fixated on her. The room grew colder and the dolls' expressions turned menacing. Mona screamed and bolted out of her room, leaving the door wide open. The next morning, Mona's parents found her sitting in the living room, pale and trembling. She told them about the haunted dolls and the chilling whispers she had heard. Her parents tried to comfort her, dismissing her experience as a bad dream. Determined to prove herself right, Mona went back to her room with her parents in tow. But to her dismay, the dolls were back on the shelf, looking harmless and motionless. Her parents assured her that it was all in her imagination, and suggested she put the dolls away if they frightened her. Reluctantly, Mona packed the old Barbie dolls into a cardboard box and hid them in the attic. Yet no matter where she went in the house, she could still hear faint whispers calling out to her. The presence of the dolls seemed to linger in the air, haunting her every step. Days turned into weeks, and Mona's fear of the dolls began to consume her. She could no longer sleep, and the once vibrant girl turned into a shadow of her former self. One night, unable to bear it any longer, she decided to get rid of the dolls for good. With her heart pounding in her chest, Mona retrieved the box from the attic and carried it to the outskirts of the woods. She dug a hole in the ground and buried the dolls, hoping to free herself from their haunting calls. But as she turned to leave, she heard a sinister laughter, followed by a chilling whisper. "You can't escape us, Mona. We'll always be with you." Terrified and defeated, Mona ran back home, feeling a cold presence following her every step. The dolls' haunting whispers continued, driving her to the brink of madness. One day, as Mona walked through town, she saw an antique store she had never noticed before. Drawn to it, she entered and browsed the dusty shelves. And there, to her horror, she found the same old Barbie dolls on display, Hannah and her haunting companions. The shop owner, a strange old woman, smiled wickedly at Mona's shocked expression. "You're a collector, aren't you, dear?" she said, her voice dripping with malice. Mona couldn't believe it. The dolls had returned, haunting her once again. Desperate for answers, she demanded to know why these dolls were tormenting her. The old woman's grin widened. "Oh, they're cursed, my dear. A long time ago, a little girl named Hannah lived in that old house. She loved her Barbie dolls dearly, but she died tragically. Her spirit is trapped in those dolls, seeking revenge on anyone who dares to take them." Mona's heart sank as she realized the truth. She was doomed to be haunted by the vengeful spirit of Hannah, trapped forever in the old Barbie dolls. The darkness in her soul grew, and the chilling whispers became her constant companion. In the small town of Willowbrook, there stood an old abandoned house that had intrigued the locals for years. According to rumors, it was once the home of a reclusive doll maker named Matilda, whose strange creations filled the rooms and hallways. Among her eerie collection were countless Barbie dolls, their eyes painted with an unsettling glimmer that seemed to follow anyone who dared to peek through the dusty windows. A group of adventurous kids, including Eleanor, Bram, and Fred, couldn't resist the allure of the haunted house. They had heard the tales and wanted to see the dolls for themselves. Late one summer afternoon, they gathered by the overgrown fence surrounding the property. "Are we really going in there?" Fred asked, peering at the decaying mansion. "Come on, it's just a bunch of old dolls," Eleanor replied, trying to sound brave. Reluctantly, they pushed open the creaky gate and stepped into the overgrown garden. The house loomed before them, casting a shadow over the toys that lay scattered on the lawn. As they ventured inside, the air turned stale, and an eerie silence enveloped them. The walls seemed to whisper stories of the past, and the faint sound of dolls giggling sent shivers down their spines. "No way that was real," Bram said, trying to dismiss the noise. But Eleanor noticed something peculiar. The dolls had moved since they entered. They were now arranged in a circle, as if watching the children's every move. "Let's get out of here," Fred said, his voice trembling. Eleanor agreed, but they found the exit sealed shut. Panic set in as they searched for another way out, but each door seemed to lead to a different room filled with dolls. Time passed, and the kids felt trapped, surrounded by the relentless gazes of the Barbie dolls. As night descended, their fear grew, and they huddled together for comfort. Suddenly, a soft voice echoed through the darkness. "Play with us," it whispered. Eleanor noticed one Barbie doll's lips moving and turned to her friends, wide-eyed. "Did you hear that?" Fred swallowed hard. "Yeah, it said play with us." The dolls started to move, their stiff limbs creaking as they shifted positions. One by one, they rose from their spots and closed in on the terrified children. Eleanor screamed as she realized they were surrounded by living dolls. They couldn't run. There was nowhere to escape. The dolls' painted eyes glowed with an unnatural light, captivating the children, and they felt their minds slipping away. Time became a blur as the dolls danced around them, and Eleanor, Bram, and Fred felt themselves becoming like the dolls, lifeless and hollow. They had become part of Matilda Haunted Collection. Years passed, and the legend of the haunted house and its cursed inhabitants grew. Local kids dared each other to enter the abandoned mansion, but none ever returned. One day, a new family moved to Willowbrook. They had a young girl named Rosa who loved dolls, and one afternoon wandered into the overgrown garden, drawn by an inexplicable pull. As she reached the entrance, she noticed the dolls, their eyes glimmering like stars. "Hello, little girl," a soft voice whispered from one of the dolls. Rosa didn't feel afraid. Rather, she felt an odd sense of belonging. The dolls seemed lonely, and she wanted to keep them company. From that day on, the dolls' circle expanded, and Rosa joined their eerie dance, their painted eyes watching over her. But the house remained a place of horror, as more curious souls fell victim to the dolls' mesmerizing charm. The legend of the haunted doll collection lived on, forever luring in unsuspecting souls, trapped in a cycle of haunting that never ended, all under the watchful gaze of those unsettling Barbie dolls. In a quiet town, there was a house that everyone avoided. It had been empty for years, its windows boarded up and its yard overgrown. People whispered that the house was haunted, and the dolls inside were the cause of it all. One day, a curious girl named Layla dared to step inside. She had heard the stories but didn't believe in ghosts. As she explored the dusty rooms, she found a collection of old Barbie dolls. They were unlike any dolls she had seen before. Their eyes seemed to follow her, and their painted smiles gave her an uneasy feeling. Layla decided to take one of the dolls home, thinking it might be a unique decoration for her room. She chose a doll named Athena, with long blonde hair and a pink dress. That night, as Layla lay in bed, she heard a soft giggling coming from the corner of her room. Startled, Layla turned on the light and looked at Athena. The doll's painted smile seemed wider, almost as if it had come to life. Layla shook her head, telling herself it was just her imagination playing tricks on her. The next night, the giggling returned, and this time, Athena's plastic eyes blinked. Layla's heart raced as she stared at the doll. "Stop it," she whispered, her voice trembling. But the giggling continued, growing louder and more unsettling. Layla couldn't take it anymore. She grabbed Athena and threw her into the closet, slamming the door shut. The giggling abruptly stopped. Layla tried to sleep, but a feeling of unease lingered in the air. As she closed her eyes, she heard a whisper, faint but unmistakable. "Let me out!" Layla's eyes shot open and she stared at the closet door. The voice had come from inside. Slowly, she approached the closet and opened the door. Athena was sitting there, her smile now twisted into a sinister grin. Terrified, Layla grabbed the doll and ran to the living room. She thought about throwing it away, but something stopped her. Instead, she decided to do some research. Layla discovered that the dolls had belonged to a girl named Sarah, who had lived in the haunted house many years ago. Sarah had been lonely and had treated the dolls like her friends, talking to them and playing with them all day long. One day, tragedy struck. Sarah had disappeared without a trace, leaving behind her beloved dolls. The town had searched for her, but she was never found. Layla's heart sank as she read the story. She realized that Sarah's spirit might be trapped within the doll, searching for a friend to keep her company. Layla felt a mixture of pity and fear. Determined to help Sarah find peace, Layla returned to the house with Athena. She placed the doll in Sarah's old room and spoke softly, telling Sarah that she wasn't alone anymore, that she had a friend in Layla. That night, as Layla lay in bed, she heard the giggling again, but this time it was different, softer and sadder. Layla smiled, feeling a sense of connection with the lonely spirit. Weeks passed and Layla and Athena became inseparable. Layla would talk to the doll, sharing her thoughts and dreams. The giggling continued, but it no longer frightened her. Then one night something changed. Layla woke up to find Athena standing at the foot of her bed. The doll's eyes were filled with sadness and her plastic smile had faded. Layla's heart ached as she reached out to the doll. "What's wrong, Athena?" The doll's voice was barely a whisper, a faint echo in the darkness. "Thank you, but I can't stay." Tears welled up in Layla's eyes as she realized what was happening. Sarah's spirit was finally moving on, finding the peace she had been longing for. Athena's plastic form began to fade, slowly disappearing until she was nothing but a wisp of light. Layla watched, both sad and relieved, as the spirit of Sarah left the doll behind. The room grew colder, and Layla pulled her blanket tightly around her. She knew she had done the right thing, helping a lost soul find its way. As Layla drifted back to sleep, she heard a faint whisper in the air, a soft voice that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. "Goodbye, my friend." And just like that, the haunted dolls were no more. Their chilling presence replaced by a bittersweet memory of a girl who had found solace and friendship in the most unexpected of places.
In a quiet town called Dollhaven, there lived a young girl named Lucy. She was a lonely child with a heart full of kindness, but her days were spent in solitude. One day, her aunt gifted her a box of old Barbie dolls she had found in the attic. Excited, Lucy began playing with her new toys, unaware that these dolls carried a dark secret. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the dolls came to life. Their plastic eyes flickered open, and they moved with eerie grace, exploring their newfound freedom. Whispering among themselves, they plotted to become Lucy's only friends, for they craved the warmth of human companionship. That night, as Lucy lay fast asleep, she heard a soft tapping sound. Groggily, she opened her eyes, only to find the Barbie dolls standing by her bed. They flashed plastic smiles that sent shivers down her spine. At first, she thought it was a dream, but the dolls continued to haunt her every night. As days turned into weeks, Lucy became more and more withdrawn, her once vibrant spirit dimming like a flickering candle. The dolls grew closer to her, whispering twisted tales of friendship, convincing her that they were all she needed. The sinister chorus of their voices echoed through her mind, making her believe she was finally loved. Lucy's aunt grew concerned about her niece's strange behavior. The once cheerful girl now wore a permanent gloom on her face. One day the aunt stumbled upon the dolls as they returned to their lifeless positions. She couldn't shake off the feeling that something was terribly wrong. Late that night, unable to sleep, Lucy's aunt decided to investigate further. She tiptoed into Lucy's room, her heart pounding in her chest. The moonlight cast eerie shadows on the dolls, making them appear even more sinister. As she studied their lifeless forms, she noticed a faint glow emanating from their eyes. Curiosity took over, and the aunt carefully examined the dolls one by one. To her horror, she discovered strange markings etched on their backs, symbols of dark rituals and dark spirits. The dolls had been cursed, trapped between the living and the dead, seeking eternal companionship from unsuspecting children. Determined to save her niece, the aunt sought help from an old woman known for her wisdom in dealing with the supernatural. Together, they concocted a plan to break the curse. The night was stormy and foreboding as they performed the ritual. Thunder roared and rain lashed against the windows as they chanted ancient incantations. The dolls trembled and twitched, their sinister smiles replaced with contorted grimaces. Finally, the last doll's curse was broken. They fell lifeless once more, and the room fell into an eerie silence. The old woman warned Lucy's aunt that the curse was only temporarily lifted. To banish the dark spirits for good, they needed to discover who had cast the curse in the first place. Their investigation led them to a mysterious figure lurking in the shadows of Dollhaven, a disgraced toy maker named Mr. Heller. Consumed by jealousy over his failed creations, he had turned to dark magic to curse the dolls, hoping to seek revenge on the world that had rejected him. As the two women confronted Mr. Heller, a chilling confrontation ensued. He laughed maniacally, revealing that he had lured countless children into his twisted world of cursed dolls. Lucy's aunt, filled with determination to protect her niece and end this madness, summoned all her strength and performed a counter-curse. In a blinding flash of light, the curse on the dolls was broken once and for all. But the sinister spirits within the dolls did not return to Mr. Heller as he had expected. Instead, they sought new vessels, turning their malevolence towards him. The dolls, now freed from their cursed state, watched as Mr. Heller's sanity crumbled under the weight of their dark presence. Lucy's aunt and the old woman ensured that the dolls were safely disposed of, sealing them in a box and burying them deep in the woods, far away from any human habitation. Lucy, freed from the dolls' haunting presence, gradually regained her old self, but the horrors of those nights never truly left her. Years passed, and Dollhaven became a town of legends, whispering tales of the cursed dolls and the sinister toy maker. No one dared to enter the woods where the dolls were buried, fearing the dark spirit still lingered there. The town of Dollhaven remained haunted by the twisted legacy of the cursed Barbie dolls, a reminder of the darkness that could hide behind even the most innocent of smiles. The chilling story of Dollhaven serves as a warning, urging everyone to be cautious of the secrets that lie within seemingly harmless toys, waiting to unleash their darkness upon the unsuspecting.